without any further ado, these are my top 10 games of the year for the year of 2012. I'll level with you guys. Tales of Grace's F is not here because of great characters or a great story or amazing graphics. The game kind of has none of those things. In fact, I would go as far as to say is that most of the characters are among the worst in any Tales game I've ever played. The game is on my list because the battle system is probably the best in a JRPG pretty much ever. That is something that sounds like hyperbole, but it really isn't. The battle system is so good that Tales of Grace's F got my Game of the Year list, despite having the terrible characters, the story, and the really bad dungeon design. For over 50 hours, I was compelled to keep going just because the battles were that much fun. And to be absolutely fair, it's not like everything else was bad. The story may be boring, but there are some cute and funny character moments here and there, and the game made me smile and gave it somewhat more of a foundation than just having a fun battle system.
Right into next week!
I've traveled back in time from next week. Please stop throwing monsters at us.
I guess I am being a little hard on the game. It was good enough to make it onto my list, and I spent a long time deciding whether Grace's F is actually deserving just based on that one factor, even if that factor is outstanding in its field. Ultimately, I decided Grace's F was enough of a complete package to be on here, and I don't regret that. It is a testament to how fast-paced and exciting the battle system is, and I'm willing to put up with Asbel's whining, or the really long and annoying dungeons just to keep going. It's possible Tales of Grace's F is one of those right time, right place games, where I played it in the context of needing something like it to play. Who knows? At the end of the day, it's one of my favorite games of the year, even if it won't do anything to convert someone who already doesn't tolerate Tales games. But if you do, and you want a fun battle system, you won't do better than Grace's F. It's worth it to try, even if you find yourself not exactly loving all the characters in it. Perhaps because a lot of games I was actually looking forward to this year turned out to be disappointments, I ended up looking back at other less talked about games to see if they were any good. Binary Domain is one of those games that shocked me. I'll say this flat out to start. This game is better written than Mass Effect 3. You can reasonably levy the charge in this game that it is, at best, a Gears of War clone. The level of competency it displays of that is going to vary not only from level to level, but from person to person, and it makes a lot of mistakes along that path. For whatever reason, they decided your basic, unupgraded weapon would be terrible and would require time and credits to make better, leaving a very bad first impression. But somehow, the game grabbed me. I previously thought it was stupid and absurd and wouldn't be an experience worth anything beyond that, but I started getting wrapped up in the game's story and characters, and all my ironic love somehow became earnest. The game is weirdly amazing. Also, there's a French robot named Kane, and Jesus Christ, this fucking game.
Fasten your seatbelt, s'il vous plaît.
Got a screw loose.
Overall, it would be hard to argue Binary Domain is actually the best game of the year, but it's charming and actually somewhat haunting in its own way. I can't tell if the game is stupid and amazing, or brilliant and amazing, or somewhere between the two, but I finished the game knowing it had to be on my Game of the Year list. And I encourage you, if you're even slightly interested, to at least give it a try. Dragon's Dogma was not a game I expected to like, at least not for the reasons that actually fell out. Before release, it almost felt like Japan's answer to Skyrim, and, if you do try to play it like that, it falls short in many, many ways. Rather than being open and alive, Dragon's Dogma world is caged and oppressive, and that's exactly why it's so interesting. Dragon's Dogma is not about discovery. In fact, it's the opposite. You go to places because you have to, because there's missions there, but it's always dangerous. Once I got lost in the woods on my way up the mountains and had to keep reloading my save to deal with a chimera wandering around. Being underleveled and not terribly careful that early on in the game, it took me many tries and a lot of time to kill the monster. By the time I finished it off, night had fallen, so an undead knight was attracted by the commotion and attacked my party. I barely managed to beat him and limped back to the city, fighting off wolves and zombies until I could get to an inn. This feeling of fighting the world eventually fades as your character becomes far stronger than any monster in the game, but I still like what the game accomplished at the beginning and tries to bring back in the post-game. Some of my complaints were addressed in the hard mode patch, so it's probable I would enjoy the pressure of Dragon's Dogma more now than I did then. From climbing griffins to stabbing a cyclops in the eye to blind it to shooting down harpies, you feel like you're actually a small human in a world full of barbarians, a feeling that really only Pikmin compares to. The world is scary, and that's why it's fun, because each journey is one of trepidation. All in all, Dragon's Dogma takes more from the distressing feeling of Fallout than Skyrim, but it did it in its own unique way. I'm not going to be one of those people that tells you Journey changed my life, or anything like that. While a lot of my list is made up of games I spent double digits or more in terms of hours on, Journey lasted me a single hour and a half, once, several months ago, and I never played it again. If you look solely at the gameplay mechanics, you could probably even argue that an hour spent with Journey is not a particularly engaging hour. I clearly don't agree with that. I think this might be the year of interactive fiction, for me at least. While other entries on my list were either well written or had fun stories, the way Journey employed the interactive fiction label was to tell the story of a world without ever saying a word. It's not just story, it's not just atmosphere. Journey envelops the player in the pilgrimage, and you feel the same fear and catharsis as if you were in danger and out of it as well. Journey also transformed my idea of how anonymous online multiplayer could work. The people I was playing with were partners, not loudmouth 14-year-olds living in Montana. I wrote an article early in the year about how effective this silent, hidden multiplayer could be, and I still think back today to how dreadful it felt to see my partner die by falling off a cliff, and have to still continue on marching through the snow. Journey is not a life-changing artistic masterpiece, but it has a soul that very few games can match.
Show me what you're made of! Asuras!
Asuras Wrath is not a game that will show up on many Game of the Year lists, and it's not hard to see why. At first blush, it merely appears to be a not-so-great action game without much action, and a heavy emphasis on QTEs, and honestly, I can't deny that part of it exists. For a long time, the game will feel confused, and the player will either dismiss it or muddle through that confusion. But the investment can pay off, as Asuras Wrath is simply not comparable to most other experiences this year. The hay that's made about how interactive or non-interactive it is misses the point. Asuras Wrath would not be as effective if it were any different. While the entire game frames itself around the concept of it essentially being interactive anime, the plot and characters manage to be engaging. This is not even the best video game story this year, but you may be surprised at how expertly it grabs you, and wraps you to the feeling for the same desire of revenge that Asura has. You feel compelled to go further, not because you need to know what will happen, but because you need to see what will happen.
Witness the power bestowed upon us by our priestess, your very daughter, Mithra! My daughter.
It is difficult to explain what makes Asuras Wrath so amazing. The best comparison I've been able to come up with is that it reminds me of the days I would watch He-Man as a kid, and feel excitement from seeing him defeat the bad guys. Asuras Wrath captures that feeling as an adult, giving me a grim fairy tale to unfold with my participation. Asuras Wrath is not a game I will likely ever play again, but even still, the experience of playing it will stick with me for a long time. It reminds me in some ways of Cavia's Nier, though it is tonally very different. It is a game that takes some time to find its own voice, often having a hard time understanding exactly what it's trying to do, but ultimately sprints across the finish line with pride. I can't say whether you would like Asuras Wrath, but I do encourage you to find out.
It's a wrong road. Echo when they're getting new warns. But it's stronger. The farther on you go.
It's an interesting year when I have to figure out which Persona 4 game is going to make my top 10 list. Persona 4 Arena stood out from the rest of the pack of fighting games this year because it had personality, something really only Dead or Alive 5 managed to even take a stab at, and then even then not nearly as much as Persona 4. While the use of auto combos and corner circle-centric gameplay may turn off hardcore fighting game fans, it makes the game far more accessible for a layman who may be interested just because it's Persona 4. It manages to be good for beginners and ultra-precise, marrying the concept of accessibility with depth in a way certain other big-name fighters this year could not. The music, UI, and presentation are all a cut above the rest, and manage to transition Persona 4's aesthetic to a new game better than one would expect. The bulk of the story mode is the same story for every character, but a few characters manage to have new interesting things, and Labrys would actually become one of the better characters of the Persona universe. Although playing through story mode, which is essentially a visual novel with occasional fights, can be a slog, some of the stuff in there is actually surprisingly good. It's not as well written as Persona 4, and characters like Chie have become flanderized, characters like Icarus have more personality than ever. Overall, Persona 4 Arena may be a victory of fan service more than one of substance. It certainly does not lack in the latter. I've put dozens of hours into the game, and will probably put dozens more. Kind of hard to ask for more than that. For fans of Persona 4, this game's a treat. For those who aren't yet, it's still a solid title. The sad truth is, Virtue's Last Reward is not as good as its predecessor, 2010's 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors. This may be an odd way to start talking about a game so high up on my Game of the Year list, but it's something that kind of needs to be said when talking about it. I have sadly realized it's impossible for me to have the same experience that 999 gave me when I first played it, but Virtue's Last Reward gets far closer than I could have expected. Virtue's Last Reward is a game heavily centered around the idea of the prisoner's dilemma. If you thought the person in the other room was going to sell you out for a chance at a benefit to them, what would you do? But this kind of presents the game incorrectly. It's not about a BioWare-style choice between allying and betraying. It is about solving a mystery and escaping the compound by doing both. The game is not about choice. In fact, I even go as far as to say that the theme of the game, even despite the prisoner's dilemma, is about how you have no choice. I actually really considered pushing the game further down my list because of some stupid decisions with the 3DS version. If the next game still makes the same mistakes, which include not having feature parity between the two systems, and save corruption bugs they have no intention of patching, I don't care how good it is, it will not make my list. Overall, Virtue's Last Reward told a story that rocketed it to my top 5, even if it's not as great as 999's. That statement is relative, however, and VLR is still an amazing game that I spent 40 hours playing, desperate to find out just a little bit more. As someone that really thought the original Borderlands wasn't good, I nicknamed it Blands and not lovingly, I was surprised by how much I got into Borderlands II. Almost everything I complained about from the first game was fixed, and several other things changed as well. This is not to say that everything about the game is perfect, and maybe its high placing on this list speaks to the relative dearth of competition. As a single-player experience, Borderlands 2 is a little more than character tweaker. That is to say, playing single-player Borderlands for the missions is crazy. You should not do it. Single-player Borderlands 2 is not a good game. But co-op Borderlands 2? Amazing. I don't say this just because I played with the right group, though I can't discount that aspect of it. The game is actively balanced toward having a co-op party. Doing things alone makes a different and less fun game overall. But when you're with a group, everything clicks. Battles are strategic or chaotic or both, and they're still fun. Jokes are funnier when there are other people to laugh at them with you. To the extent that games can be a communal experience, Borderlands 2 taps into them as well as any game before it. The writing can be hit or miss, and when it misses is groan-worthy, but when it hits, I was laughing for days.
Oh, where the hell is... Oh, I had a violin somewhere. I was gonna play it all sarcastically. God damn it, it was gonna be awesome.
I don't recommend Borderlands 2 without qualifications, but the game can be an incredible experience that actually deserves the praise that Borderlands 1 got. Terms like Nintendo Magic are usually just crutches people use because they can't identify what they actually like about a video game. But it's not hard to establish what it is about Kid Icarus that is so good. While a number of people will simply never get over the controls, those who do will find a game that's packed full of content. Great content that rivals pretty much any game released this year. This is a console quality title on a handheld. There's good and bad implied in that, but enough good to earn its position on my list. The sheer amount of things to do in Kid Icarus is mind-boggling. This is not a Star Fox style play it for 2 hours and then you're done romp. This game is longer than most AAA console titles. The pacing can be a little rough in terms of long levels, but I was enjoying myself the whole way through. Even though I thought the flight sequences were more fun, and I probably would have preferred a few more of them along the way. Where this game shines is not somewhere you would expect it to. The writing is one of Treehouse's best localizations, and manages to be cool and funny without getting convoluted. It takes perhaps too many digressions from the main story, but it always maintains an air of being lighthearted and fun.
It's a temporal wizard.
A temporal what'sard?
If he deep fries you, keep your distance. One bite and you'll be finished.
In the absence of another Sin and Punishment game for me to laud all of my praise on, Kid Icarus is probably the best Nintendo game in years in my book. It's exciting and fun and wears its heart on its sleeve. It's a game that left me begging for a sequel and playing it over again anyway. While it didn't do everything perfect, I don't care. My ride through Kid Icarus is fun as hell, and I'm glad the game exists.
Hey Sandra, this is Diana. We're still in Savannah. Ed had a little incident with some crazy guy near the hotel, so we had to get him back to the ER and have it checked out. Anyway, he's not feeling well enough to drive back tonight, so we're staying an extra day. Thanks so much for looking after Clementine, and I promise we'll be back in time before your spring break.
Message 2, left at 11:19 p.m.
Oh my god, finally. I don't know if you tried to reach us. All the calls are getting dropped. They're not letting us leave and aren't telling us anything about Atlanta. Please, just leave the city and take Clementine with you back to Murrieta. I've got to get back to the hospital. Please let me know that you're safe.
Message 3, left at 6:51 a.m.
Clementine, baby. If you can hear this, call the police. That's 911. We love you. We love you. We love you.
The Walking Dead might not be the best video game this year as we traditionally define it, but there's not a single title this year more impactful. I don't know how to define Game of the Year. Is it the most fun, the most well-designed, the most hours I've put into it? There's an example of each of those things on this list, even in the top 5, But The Walking Dead represents something different, maybe the most important thing and the hardest to measure. I feel like, after this year is over, The Walking Dead is going to be the game that stays with me the longest. That's why it's on the top of my list. I spent a really long time thinking about whether The Walking Dead should be there, and what that means for Game of the Year. The traditional gameplay can best be described as light, and sometimes more obstacle than facilitation. The game is not about puzzles, though. It's more about the transformative process of the player becoming Lee. He is not your Commander Shepard. You are the person making those decisions, and you are the one dealing with the fact the world has ended and you can't do anything about it. All you can do is move forward. If you play The Walking Dead dissociating yourself from it, not participating in it, you are getting a lesser experience. The gravity of the situation, of a world gone in a flash, will never hit you. The game is brilliant in the way you interact with that vanished world and the shattered remnants within it. Every decision feels like the best of a set of bad ones. Every death hits you, makes you feel like maybe you could have prevented it if you were just better. Despite what the game says at the beginning, you're not really shaping the story, at least not the way you think you are. The game is not a series of branches, but I would not suggest pulling back the curtain exactly to find out how. Sometimes your decisions mean a lot, sometimes they're a little more than just shaping how someone feels about you, or even how you feel about yourself after you do something you thought you'd never have to do. Each decision, whether they change the world or not, changes you. The Walking Dead has its ups and downs, and it's ultimately not perfect. Some episodes are better than others, and one I would say is actually not that good. But at the end of the day, the things I feel about The Walking Dead are simply beyond what I feel about other games this year. If we want to make the argument that games can be art, it is not about being obtuse and pretentious and demanding that a TV screen with Braid play in a loop while sitting on a wall in the Museum of Modern Art. It is about looking at games like The Walking Dead and seeing that the experience of a video game can be every bit as valid as other forms of art. I chose The Walking Dead as my game of the year because it is an experience that the other titles, simply being video games, could not match. To put it another way, The Walking Dead is game of the year by being everything that title was never meant to be.